是墨西哥国立大学傅塞崔教授，他报告的题目是奥梅克文化中美洲最古老的文明的研究。
Good afternoon. I would like to thank the Shanghai Archaeological Forum for inviting me to give this talk, and also for the research award. I'm very honored. This award is given because of the research I've conducted for the last 30 years on the Olmec civilization. Because these topics that we've dealt with are very broad and often very complex, I decided to speak today about some specific work that we've been doing at the great Olmec capital of San Lorenzo. The Olmec arose on the Gulf Coast of Mexico. It is most famous for its monumental sculpture, particularly the colossal heads. In this slide, we can observe Mexico and the Gulf Coast in the Google Earth image. Above, the yellow color in the little map marks the state of Veracruz, and the orange box roughly shows the Olmec region. The two major capitals of the Olmec were San Lorenzo, followed by La Venta. Today, I'm going to talk about various aspects of San Lorenzo, focusing on landscape. I will touch on topics such as San Lorenzo in the physical landscape, as landscape architecture, as a cosmological landscape, and as landscape urbanism. In this map, you can see the location of the two major centers, San Lorenzo in the lower Coatzacoalcos river drainage and La Venta in the Tonalá drainage, only a few kilometers from the sea. To the northwest, you can see the only volcanic area in the Olmec region, the Tuxtlas Mountains. It is the source of the majority of the hard stone used by the Olmec for their grinding tools and stone sculpture. In other words, the San Lorenzo Olmec transported huge blocks of stone weighing as much as 30 tons and preformed sculptures from this area that's about 60 kilometers away in a straight line. Oops, if we went too far. Oh, what did I do? I went too far. What happened? Okay, there it is. I'm sorry. To the southeast of the Tuxtla Mountains, we see the coastal plains. This is where the principal developments of Olmec culture are found. The Olmec had a clear preference for the soggy plains and founded their capitals in this environment. The lower Coatzacoalcos river drainage has an area of over 21,000 square kilometers and a mean annual discharge of more than 22,000 cubic meters. Thus, it's a very dynamic environment. Since human behavior shapes and is shaped by its spatial and environmental contexts, it is important to understand its configuration and natural processes. The Coatzacoalcos coastal plain is given shape by an underlying geologic structure. Today, it carries a huge sediment load caused by deforestation and erosion. As the river reaches the plain, it is freed from the confines of the upland hills, upriver hills, and begins to move across the landscape, altering its course and creating a classic pattern of meanders. Consequently, the plain is characterized by this complex web of oxbow lakes and scars of ancient meander loops. You may be surprised to know that water transport is given little attention in Mesoamerican studies, with the exception of the Maya area and central Mexican lake system. This is due to the fact that Mesoamerica does not have the long fluvial systems that are found in other areas of the world, such as the Yangtze, the Yellow River, the Amazon, the Nile, the Ganges, the Mississippi, Missouri, the Tigris and Euphrates, and so on and on. Mesoamerican river basins are often relatively small and therefore cannot sustain large-scale transport systems. The case of the Coatzacoalcos drainage is slightly different. This river and its tributaries are very important in regional communication and travel from ancient times to modern days. There is evidence that the Olmec incorporated this river system in a complex land-water transport system that includes ports and docks at sites that are strategically located at confluences, crossings, and intersection points. I would like to emphasize that the hydrologic cycle sets the rhythms of life for all living beings in the region. It is a land that tastes of water. Now I'm going to show you some images of the lower Coatzacoalcos drainage in different moments of this cycle. This is the Coatzacoalcos River in the dry season, from March to May. You can see that the river is contained within its banks, and other than permanent lakes in the background, the land is dry. The rest of the year is not so dry. Precipitation is greatest from June to September, and then drops off when the hurricane season starts. Low flooding can happen at any time that the water levels increase, but there is little overbank flooding. This is what a high flood looks like. You can still make out the channels, but there is plenty of water. This type of flooding does not occur every year, so therefore there is no yearly fertilization of the riverbanks with rich sediments. I am sure you are familiar with such scenes since there are many large floods known in Chinese history. High magnitude floods like this one occur even less frequently. Obviously, in the southern Gulf Coast, high ground safe from flooding is highly appreciated and sought out. From Olmec times to the present, the inhabitants have been careful observers of dry land and register even the tiniest piece of land that stays dry during floods. Analyzing risk is a way of life in this region. Only 10 to 15% of the lower Coatzacoalcos drainage contains high ground safe from flooding. That is why the Olmec founded their two consecutive capitals, San Lorenzo and La Venta, on islands of high ground that are strategically placed in the fluvial network. In Olmec times, the plains were soggier than they are today. This is today. Geomorphological studies show changes in the environment since Olmec times. Oh, thank you. San Lorenzo now looks like now looks like this in the dry season. The site is that distant elevation where the arrow points, and it's surrounded by vast floodplains, which tend to dry up in the dry season. In ancient times, it looked something like this. In the rainy season, still today, we get a hint of what it looked like back then. Some years bring much water to the area, and the landscape looks like it was 4,000 years ago. So an island surrounded by water, safe ground for human habitation. Now let's look at some interesting artifacts that send a message very similar to the idea of high ground in the landscape. San Lorenzo is important for the length of its uninterrupted formative period occupation dating from 1800 BC. It stands out for having produced an amazing quantity of magnificent stone sculpture. Their famous art style is considered a symbolic system which emphasizes the existence of a stratified society led by hereditary rulers backed by the divine legitimation. Without a doubt, colossal heads are emblematic of Olmec culture. As huge portraits of ancient rulers, they represent a small segment of the ancient Olmec population. Another type of large sculpture also is related to rulers. I am referring to these monolithic stone thrones that were the seats of power of the Olmec rulers. The largest Olmec throne was found at San Lorenzo. It was found in a rulership context called Group E. This is a large architectural precinct built completely of earth that covers 10,000 square meters and has 4 low platforms, all made of earth, surrounding a patio. It contains several rulership emblems, such as the colossal head portrait, the large throne, and a standard bearer. Thrones are political icons at the regional level. Settlement survey indicates that thrones are only found, that large thrones are only found at important centers. They're found at the capital, with the smaller ones at lesser centers. Here you can see the capital of San Lorenzo, which is the regional center, and 2 nearby secondary centers, Loma del Zapote and Estero Rabon. Each of these satellite centers has a small throne whose size is proportional to the importance of the ruler. Size matters, just like they said in the announcements to that movie, as well as the iconography. Thus, monolithic stone thrones are the seats of rulers. At the same time, they are icons of the office of ruler and symbols of powerful sites. Now we're going to see how this kind of monument is related to concepts of the Olmec landscape. The large thrones have several important parts. There is a raised square on the top and an upper ledge with bas-relief. The main throne is the largest part of the throne. Main body, excuse me. The front has a human figure seated within a deep niche, and the sides have bas-relief. The raised square is the actual place where the ruler sat, and is reminiscent of later period symbols of the woven mat or animal skin, such as jaguar pelt. It also refers to a high sacred place. The ledge shows an abstract representation of the cosmic deity, a monstrous being with stylized eyes, a wide nose, and a large upper jaw with fangs. The ledge represents the top of the head and the upper jaw of the monster. Because this deity is synonymous with the earth and the sacred mountain, the ledge represents the terrestrial surface. The corner image shows a 3-dimensional representation of this being from La Venta. The main body of the throne shows the mouth of the cosmic deity. The niche is a symbol of the mouth of the sacred cave of origins where the ancestors lived, the portal to the underworld. The image in the corner shows another way of representing this concept, where the entrance to the cave is clearly the mouth of the monster. The seated personage within the niche is interpreted as the apical ancestor of the ruler's lineage. Relief 1 from Chalcatzingo shows the lateral representation of a seated figure within a niche. Each large throne has many symbolic facets. It symbolizes the cosmic deity, the cosmos itself, a sacred mountain, and a sacred place. To summarize, the thrones were the seat of rulers. The tabletop thrones with frontal niches are symbols of the most powerful rulers at the largest centers. The thrones of these rulers are imbued with sacred mountain symbolism. They were, in a sense, a three-dimensional interactive model of the cosmos. We're going to come back to this in a minute. Now, let's go back to the map. Here's a close-up of the San Lorenzo Island showing the location of the capital in its highest portion. The inset shows San Lorenzo inside the blue circle and the plateau, which is the elite area of the capital. Our excavations have explored domestic, ceremonial, and productive contexts across the site. The cultural deposits tend to be deeply buried. In other words, you really have to look hard and deep to find evidence for the profound cultural changes that affected the development and organization of the first Olmec center. The site of San Lorenzo is made of dirt. It has no massive stone-faced pyramids surrounding broad plazas where the people congregated to watch and participate in ceremonial events. That is why it is fundamentally different from other great Mesoamerican centers. In fact, when you walk across San Lorenzo, you can hardly tell that it's an archaeological site until you trip over a colossal head like Matthew Sterling did. Traditional archaeological methods, such as test pits, are useful, but the shortness of the dry season, only 3 months, means you cannot expand or go too deep because the rains will, no, I still have 15 minutes. Well, we're not going to see any of this. So we decided that we could core San Lorenzo and combined LIDAR and ArcGIS to figure out what's below this great site. So I'll just run through this. You all know about this traditional coring technique, which we use systematically, 20-meter intervals. We went down to as deep as 25, 26 meters with cultural material at the site. It was always all very, very systematic so that we could reconstruct the construction stages of the site and also determine the location of buildings. I guess we'll just kind of whiz through this. Okay, these are the core samples. All this was database so that we could analyze and deal with this great body of information. We were able to determine that there were construction stages to this site. The orange is the natural geoform. The first stage of construction is yellow. It was filling and leveling. Then the building of the terraces in blue. And finally, the big yellow clay cap represented by the red. Okay, wait a minute, let's go back. What we were able to do with this is to calculate how many cubic meters of earthen fill was used in each construction stage. We found out that there were 7 million cubic meters of earthen fill in San Lorenzo, which is 50 times the size of Temple 1 at Tikal. It's also 7 times the size of the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan. So what do we have? We have an island, a safe haven in the midst of a floodable area, and that's artificial. This is the whole point. It's artificial. It was made specifically to, let's skip this, to be able to place the population on this site. And the Olmec did that. They built it deliberately with rings of terraces around it. And then they placed the population on that site so that the highest status was on the top and status diminished the further you got away from the center and the lower the altitude. Okay. At the top of the plateau, you get high prestige places like the Red Palace. In the terraces, they're a little bit less fancy residents. And in the periphery, you have the really poor structures. So what this did, we found out that there's a structuring of population on this artificial, huge construction project. And this is important because they built their own sacred mountain. There was an island there that pre-existed, but they made it larger and they gave it the shape they wanted. And then they put their people on it. They made them live in the places that that corresponded to them by status. We found out that we have a huge population, 12,000 people, a population density of 11 to 19. The site extends over almost 800 square kilometers. And well, I don't read Chinese and I forgot what that said. This is a graph of the general trends in population. You can see that, that after 1300, 1200, you get a huge spike in population and in density. So what do we have? We have San Lorenzo, an artificial hill surrounded by water, symbol of the Olmec origin myth, just like those thrones. A sacred place, the cradle of Olmec civilization, and the beginnings of urbanism in Mesoamerica. Thank you.